Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this latest narration of the web series The Nature of Predators. If you're new to the series, there is a playlist listed down below in the description, and as always, I hope that you enjoy. Chapter 163. Memory Transcription. Subject: Captain Sovereign, United Nations Fleet Command. Date: Standardized Human Time, March 24th, 2137. Now that humanity and its allies were here at Alpha, I could feel the weighty gaze of history upon us. The chance to free our societies from the Federation's grip was both terrifying and inspiring. The Kolshians had stripped us of our own cultures and thrust us into a censored life of suffering. A government that valued control above all else must not be allowed to exist. Just as I had once considered humans a menace incapable of feeding, out to conquer and pillage, I saw the same creatures that deserved anguish fighting in the system. The Dominion and the Commonwealth, poor and poor, both responsible for my tormented lot in life. If it weren't for Russell, I might stand with Onzo in wanting Uffa glassed. The personalized anger always shaped my strategizing for the better, though the yodel had been piping up before I could assemble my tactics. I guess the primitive wanted both jobs at Census Station. However, I had no intention of taking a backseat during the attempt to vanquish the Kolshians. My eyes stayed alert for anything useful that could kickstart new ideas, while monitoring the sensor feed for data relevant to our tactical options. 50,000 friendlies at the edge of our detection range caught my attention. In the span since we first arrived in system, our fleet had now gained 80,000 new participants, nearly doubling our original count. Of course, I'd like to have Ilthus's head on a pike, but thankfully, that warmongering Arxel seemed capable of killing off the beasts under his control by himself. 1/3 of his force dying back at the gas giant saved human lives, so I could tolerate the Greys getting blown to dust in our stead. That said, I hoped the computer wouldn't identify these new arrivals as more Dominion monsters, answering to some other chief hunter with a vicious ideology. The confusing bit was that they were denoted as friendlies. If these were Federation or Arxel vessels, their signature would have been matched to the ones in system. Had someone from the Sapient Coalition decided to send some more help? I snapped my head up, catching on to a remark from Onzo about needing more ships. Then you're going to like this. Already marked a tentative green. Computer must think that they're not Kolshian or Dominion. We should ask these guys to head towards the bulk of the action, rather than drifting way out yonder. The yodel had been pensive since the battle began, likely worried about our odds of taking down this army. A joint force from the two greatest powers in the galaxy, which shattered the records for any battle force. Onzo had understood that our outlook was grim going in. I think the primitives saw this as a suicide mission. Reality hadn't looked upon us with kindness at first. The Terran shipyards at Proxima Centauri, built up adjacent to the colony with temporary housing, and the cumulative manufacturing power of Earth held significant output for a single species. The predators seemed as if they could do anything when faced with a challenge to their kind. Yet it paled in comparison to the system-pilling numbers that we were up against today. I knew what hopelessness looked like from gauging the morale of my Gojit crew back when we squared off against the Arxel. The charge we led against the Cradle's raiders had a few realists like Onzo. It was only when Ilthus showed up that I saw the first glimmer of hope within the yodel, and with 50,000 new additions to our roster, optimism was gleaming in my crewmates' eyes. I could see that the marsupial was trying to temper his rising spirits. It was important to verify that these were friendlies. If these latest additions were truly on our side, we might be able to fill the system with our own fleet. There is an issue of the 200,000 enemies that are Shadow Fleet, but it sounds like the Yodel and Terrans have their number. Something about beams of particles? Before we hail the villas, we should know who they are, Tyler decided. For all we know, it could be some trick by the Kolshians to dress their fleet up as Vendel ships. Samantha rolled her eyes. That would never work. The Vendel gave us most of their military. 50,000 ships don't grow on trees. Are you sure about that, Sam? Carlos teased. The blonde-haired officer blinked in irritation. Enough! You get my point. We can't afford to be wrong here. Who are we dealing with? Just one more second, sir. Onzo furiously applied some filters to the subspace trail data, before his optimism seemed to fizzle. Oh, that's, it's the Dirtian Shield. I shot a withering look at the Yodel. Why are you saying that like it's a bad thing? Because, like all Federation militaries except for the ones we're squaring off against, they've shown that they're completely incompetent. I was in the Federation military. My point stands, old man. Insolent prick! Do you know who was the only captain to spot the Terran ambush and Gojit border outposts, despite their stealth deception? Samantha called a nose at me. Why are you saying that like it's a good thing? Besides, maybe my memory's a little hazy, but didn't you do nothing to intervene? Something about expecting us to be unable to resist slaughtering the civilians on your colonies, so you camped by an inhabited world instead of your base. I might have been a little offside. My point is, I saw through your tricks, so I was somewhat competent. Not all Federations are the same. Uh-huh. Tyler was visibly trying not to laugh. This really shouldn't be amusing, should it? Guess compared to the shit that came after, this is good old days. Now sit back. We're going fast as we can to help out those SE ships. Unfortunately, Onzo has a point about Federation captains not holding up under pressure. They need us. Damn right they do, the Yodel declared. Well, now that they're here, don't we have to contact the Dirty and Shield to make sure that they don't wander off unsupervised? I'm sure that we wouldn't put it that way, but yes. It's a good number of ships, and maybe this time will be different. Believe it or not, I heard they held up surprisingly well defending Kalqua. Cornered animals, sir. Sutherland probably needs the concept explained, since prey could never hurt anyone just because they're out of options. I scoffed. I don't take explanations from medievalists and microwave chefs. Go make your fecking call. Officer Cardona ran a final confirmation with Onzo on the data before passing it along the news of the Dirty and Shield reinforcements to Captain Monahan. The UN commander gauged the distance between us and the floundering Sapien coalition. The man-Kolshian ships were making quicker work of our direct allies than the Shield's last stand. Pairing the two groups together could grant them more backbone, and adding the Kalqua natives to the mix took our tally above 180,000. The real question was whether the avians were finally friendly towards the humans, or whether they'd cause fractious disruptions. The tone of this conversation would indicate their disposition towards us. Without humanity's kindness, the Dirtian species would be in the same position as the Gojits post-cradle, if not worse. I don't see how they could find it in their hearts to still harbor hatred for us. A Dirtian commander blinked onto the screen. We were hoping the Yodel captain would speak to us about our integration, but I suppose the Predator will suffice. We're here to make Alpha pay for what they did to us. Good, Monahan growled with a neutral expression. If I may, when the homogeneity's numbers devastated at Kalqua, I thought you only had a little less than 10,000 ships total. I do know my own fleet strength. Look, we lost more people than you did on Earth. I'm so angry I can't think straight. The Kolshians attacked us again. We'd be fecked anyways, so we might as well point our guns at them, here and now. Understood? The other 40,000 are Shield allies? The Leshy felt guilty for not sending any ships to Kalqua, some grudge about being iced out of the Federation military. The Jawa saved most of their fleet for today because, surprise, they wanted to help out with this anyway. Wait, why am I telling a Predator this? I'm sure the motives of the 44 species and which ones turned up don't matter to you. What registers is violence, and there's 40,000 shield ships that want to dish that out. You know, I'm happy you're here. We'll forward the coordinates of our herbivore allies' advance, and you can team up with them. They'll fill you in on the details you need. Oh, and Commander, the avian stiffened. Yes, humanity is not your enemy. We're, starting to see that. Thank you for saving us. The Dirtian struggled to say those last words and hurriedly disconnected from the call. Samantha chuckled with disbelief. It seemed the avians hadn't put the entirety of the Predator distaste aside. However, I trusted the Shield to fight by our side as long as it meant dishing out retribution to Alpha. The look on the homogeneity commander's eyes when she spoke about her anger struck a chord. It wasn't dissimilar to how I'd felt after losing my family, stewing in hatred and a desire to make the responsible party suffer. In her case, that grief was fresh. Trusting the Dirtian not to do something rash would be foolhardy under the circumstances. We need to keep an eye on them. They're not thinking straight, I said. Carlos nodded in agreement. I know. Every human on the ship knows how they feel. Many of us came out of the Earth's attack willing to do anything to the Federation.
However much they're not of sound mind now, Tyler began.
Samantha sighed. Or ever.
We need their numbers. Their desperation could make them fight better. You heard it from their mouth. They know if this battle isn't won, they can't defend Kalqua anyway. Their fleet is in tatters.
Onza flicked his ears. The archives told us how loud and individualistic they are, and it shows. They do crazy illogical things during bursts of emotion, assassinating Lyconis because they were angry over their uplifting, leaving Kalqua with 0 ships to their name now.
Let's not tell them that, I responded. It won't matter as long as we win this fight. Unlike the Kolshians, the United Nations isn't a habitual practitioner of genocide.
Yet the Federation said we'd conquer and enslave them all.
Carlos shook his head, as if disappointed by our continued reality. They accuse predators of what they themselves do. I wonder if they hate us because our darkest moments are a mirror to their finest.
Samantha patted his shoulder. Oh, you sweet little thing. They hate us because of our eyes and our food, and don't need another reason. They wanted us to be conquerors. It just turns out the system that we're conquering is theirs. Now, let's go bail out those bumbling SC idiots.
This should be an easy stop, but let's not get complacent. Man your stations, everyone, Tyler ordered.
Yodel, Technocracy ships and Terran drones were also moving their vectors towards us, after tallying a resounding victory against the Shadow Fleet. The Sapien Coalition bunch were the last group still engaged for our initial skirmishes by the outer planets. A light formation of manned hostiles were giving our herbivore friends a world of trouble. Tactics on both sides had broken down into disorganized shooting match that was tilting towards the Kolshians. The SC numbers had been nearly halved by an enemy band much smaller than them. It wasn't worth waiting for the Dirty and Shield or our autonomous allies to join our rescue.
Human crew members can handle a straightforward task and do a clinical job cleaning up this area. The quicker we deal with this, the sooner we can push towards the inner planets.
Onzo pulled up an enemy target on screen as we coasted within range, while I monitored whether any forces turned towards us. The Commonwealth vessels seemed a bit dispirited, like they believed that their government was sacrificing them to the cause. With those extenuating factors in mind, it wasn't a surprise that they were now slow to react. If Rassel was still alive today, would he have been called home and roped into serving his nation? I almost felt guilty as we nabbed our first mark, nailing them with a plasma beam that was all too easy to land. The Sapien Coalition regained a bit of their senses, with humanity coming to their aid. Our herbivore allies regrouped enough to coordinate fire and specific Kolshian vessels. I passed along which ships were being targeted by our allies, so we could pool our resources on the ones they neglected. The manned enemies turned their last missiles towards the human-crewed ships out of spite. Bitter at the predators who sealed their suicide mission, the barrage could be battered aside by most of us, except for smaller vessels that had too many inbound explosives centered on them. With a rapidly dwindling number of Commonwealth survivors, now out of projectiles, it simplified cleanup even further. A small handful of Kolshian ships attempted to flee and were pursued by the fastest Terran craft. We couldn't allow them to fall back, bolstering the largest contingents near Alpha. I knew the point of the staggering resistance was to offer us up for when we reached the inner sanctum. Excessive planetary defense and the best Commonwealth Dominion vessels would be waiting. Having less threats to contend with improved our odds, given the daunting scale of the task ahead. Taking the Federation's founder's world wouldn't even be the end of our mission. Finish off anything with Kolshian warp drive, Monahan barked. We have new orders from command. While it's ideal to split our forces, UN manned ships are being paired with the Shield and the Coalition. We can't afford to leave them to their own devices, so we stick with them like glue. Navigation, sensors, find us the best point of attack by the inner planets. Weapons, bring me an update on our ammunition stores. Comms, patch us into allied channels and keep us synchronized. A chorus of assent came from the stations the captain called upon, while the last Kolshian resistance in the region was mopped up. It was troublesome that our Sapien Coalition allies had bungled such an easy assignment. I hoped the furious revenge-seeking Dirty and Shield would have a higher level of competency. If none of our partners could handle their own, our warships would be strapped to an anchor. Human leadership needed to have a good sense to cut them loose, if it came down to it, and make the requisite sacrifices to win this battle. I peered at the sensor screen. I see we've plotted an intercept course to rendezvous with the Dirty and Shield. After that, I say we go towards the oblong rocky planet Kato, if I remember its name. An unimportant research colony with a few hab modules. Unless you want to bomb it, I wouldn't concern yourself with settlements aside from Alpha. Sovlan is right, Onzo agreed. It's a prime target. There is a mix of Commonwealth manned vessels and Dominion ships. I imagine neither side likes that, so they might not be fighting or coordinating at their best.
Precisely, Tyler Duckley said. I'll forward your suggested destination to the navs, along with the location of the enemies. Anything else we should know? Well, just some tactical advice, sir. From what we can see on here, the enemy resistance only gets thicker as we go forward. I recommend keeping the SC and the Shield in supporting roles.
No, that won't do. The Dirty won't be happy taking a back seat here, Onzo challenged. They want revenge for what was done to them. We've already established that they're highly emotional and not thinking straight.
Then what are you suggesting? We let them take the lead despite their questionable competency?
That's exactly what I'm suggesting, Sovlan. Let the Dirty pick their role and see how they fare. Kato is the test for whether it's best to let them go off on their own.
Tyler pursed his lips. I don't see a better option to keep them in line, and getting in their way may make them turn their guns on us. This might convince them that we're on the same side. I'll fill the captain in. She can have someone that's an herbivore ask their decision on how she wants to play this.
Let's hope this goes better than we all expect, Samantha grumbled. As the census officer marched off for a conference with Monahan, I found myself questioning the Yodel's suggestion. I hated to admit Onzo's advice was normally sound, but in this case, his idea could be detrimental to the fleet's success pushing deeper. It would be enough of a challenge to protect weaker allies without putting them in charge of our next move. The humans were attempting to manage a tricky situation, with the numerous parties for and against them in the battle, yet this seemed to be like a ludicrous gamble. I hoped that the Dirge and Shield combat actions today would be as bold as their words. We needed not just to win the next stage of the clash, but also to swing momentum to our side heading to Alpha. None of this factored in Ilthus' ships, which had moved off on their own vector rather than aiding our Sapien Coalition friends. That bloodthirsty chief hunter must not have wanted the appearance of teaming up with the prey. There was no question that the Dirtian would not appreciate our Oxal aid. I didn't envy the Terran brass trying to juggle these different interests. If anyone could keep this tinderbox from erupting into flames, it was humanity. The Predators had been agents of peace since day one on the galactic scene. End of chapter. I would just like to thank our T5 members, Lord Azrakal, Ambrose Cattell, Quantum Wednesday, Dragzoon W.R.E, Blueberry Cat, Cam Maxwell, Casper Arnholtz, Bushmaster 177, and Leslie 517. Thank you very much.